We have many people on the line. Thank you all for joining. As I said, we prepared a very interesting meetup today. And actually, I want to start with the first presentation by Shlomi Ben Hur. Shlomi, first of all, is a dear friend of mine. He's a colleague. He's currently a product security and privacy architect at Opentext, which was purchased by Opentext, purchased Trend Micro.
Micro Focus.
And what? I'm sorry, Shlomi?
Micro Focus.
Micro Focus. I'm sorry for that. In the past 2 decades, Shlomi he was in the cybersecurity field, and he has an extensive knowledge and experience in R&D, product security, SSDLC, SecDevOps, threat modeling. He's also lecturing related to cybersecurity, and he knows how to build security strategic with also customer handling and security response. So Shlomi will talk today about data privacy, the transition from on-prem cloud from on-prem to the cloud-based security. So Shlomi, the stage is all yours. You have also the control.
Cool. Shall I start clicking down?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much, Lior, for the kind opening words. So that's me there with the sunglasses. That's the best picture I could find that Lior was ready to put in the opening. So as Lior mentioned, I have some extensive experience with product-related security. And in the recent 5 to 6 years, I also added part of the privacy issues. So I'm clicking page down. It's not shifting slides.
Wait a second, Shlomi. Wait a second.
Okay. So thank you again to Gidi, Farkash, CISO of Pipl Security, and the ISC Israeli chapter leader, and to you, of course, Lior, CISO of Perimeter 81 and the leader of this AppSec meeting. Just clicking down again. It's moving slowly. Can you perhaps, Lior, scroll down?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So we'll talk about these 3 topics in this session. Key terms and concepts. We won't dive too deep into privacy, just to give you the 4 or 5 key terms and concepts about privacy. So for you to be able to get a hold of the concept of privacy and how it relates to our products and moving into cloud. Of course, if you have any follow-up questions, either in this section, in this presentation, or later on, feel free to reach out. We'll talk about cloud-focused privacy, products and capabilities, and we'll go into product-focused privacy. Next slide, please. So why is privacy so important? You jumped the gun, so never mind. The answer is money. Okay, never mind. And yes, it is money, and as in euro, and plenty of it. There is a lot of money in privacy. So when we talked about security in the past, we said it's interesting, it's not interesting to us, it's interesting to the VP, it's not interesting to the VP, it's interesting to customers, it's not interesting to the customer. There's no issue when it comes to privacy, because we have a lot of money at stake here, and it's not okay. So I do encourage you to go into this website. It's called enforcementtracker.com, and you can see there all the fines which the European Union via GDPR, and we'll talk about GDPR in a second, have created on various companies. And you can see, for example, that 746 million euro fine was given to Amazon Europe, and 405 million euros fine was given to Meta, and also Google. So you can filter in this site based on country, date and time, the amount of the fine, the article of GDPR that was used in order to create the fine. It's a hilarious website to understand how powerful GDPR and privacy is to the companies that we work with today. And let's talk about key terms and in privacy. Two of them is GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation. And I emphasize regulation because to differentiate it between regulation and the standard. ISO, for example, ISO 27001 or ISO 27034 is a standard which you elect whether to uphold or not, to follow or not. Regulation is something that you don't have a choice. You must comply with the regulation. And GDPR is relevant to all the European Union countries, as well as the EEA countries, which is Liechtenstein, I think in Norway and Iceland. So all these countries are part of this regulation. The other one is CPRA, the California Privacy Rights Act, which is formerly the CCPA, which the state of California in the US has enacted, and the entire US is following that specific regulation. So these are the two key terms or key security privacy regulations that we need to follow. Another key term, very important key term that we want to understand is the term called data subject. The data subject is the identified or identifiable living individual to whom personal data relates, which is basically you and I, the end user, or what we call in the system, the end user in these regulations is referred to as a data subject. And we'll explain in a minute what is the importance of that data subject when we come to talk about privacy. The other term is PII, personally identifiable information, which is any information that relates to an identified or identifiable living individual. Different pieces of information which collected together can lead to the identification of a particular person also constitute personal data. So when we talk about PII, we're not talking about just part of an information, but either a part of information or a collection of information that could lead to the identification of that individual, and we'll expand about it in a minute. The other one is data controller. Data controller is the natural or legal person, public authority, agency, or other body, which alone or jointly with others, and that's the significant part, determines the purposes and means of the processing of personal data. The data, if you're a data controller in your organization from a GDPR or CPRA perspective, you're the prime target and you're the accountable one to make sure that your system correctly follows the regulation and implements all the controls which are needed. You are the 100% owner of what happens in your system. You're the one to determine the purpose and means of processing of personal data. The other one is the data processor, which is a natural legal person, public authority, agency, or other body, which processes personal data on behalf of the controller and under their authority. So I could be a data controller, meaning I define the purpose of the data, I define the extent of the data, and etc. But I contract someone else, which I determine to be the data processor, and that data processor will collect the data and process the data on my behalf. So these two entities, the data controller primarily and the data processor, together are the owners of what constitutes the responsibility under GDPR and CPRA. So what's GDPR and CPRA are all about? In the security world, we have OWASP Top 10, for example, and in privacy, we have something which is called Privacy Top 12. KPIs key privacy indicator. So these are the 12 key privacy indicators that whenever you talk about privacy, it's similar when you talk about security OS top 10, you're talking about authentication, authorization, encryption, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So when you talk about privacy, you talk about these two KPIs, security and pseudonymization, which means how do I secure my data? Data breach and notification, meaning how do I notify anyone in case of a breach? Right to be forgotten, in case I registered to a system and I want to stop being a registered in that user, what's my right to be forgotten in that system? Right to portability means my capability to transfer my PII from system A to system B, consent and right to withdraw, notice, et cetera, et cetera. So when we talk about privacy, we talk about these 12 KPIs. And when we talk about these 12 KPIs, when we talk about privacy, everything around these 12 KPIs that you see in the slide revolve around the data subject. In this case, it's John Doe, and the PII, whether it's social security, whether it's the birthday, biometric identity identifiers, address, email address, etc. So whenever we talk about privacy, we talk about the data subject, the PII, and the 12 KPIs that surround these two entities. When we talk about cloud-focused privacy, and I will give you 3 examples. Cloud-focused privacy deals with these four KPIs. One is security and pseudonymization, meaning how do we secure the data? Data breach and notification, meaning how do we notify in case of a data breach? Supply chain obligations, how do we make sure that our supply chain in our products are up to speed in terms of security? And transparency, meaning what is our capabilities to share the PII that we collect with our designated customers. And here's the first example. I took a snapshot of a product called Lightspin. If you log into the console, you can see here in the compliance framework, they have a part about AWS GDPR compliance, and you can see very, very nicely that you have issues which are related to Article GDPR 25, Article 30, et cetera, and for each related article, you can see whether you comply or not comply. So for example, you can see that S3 bucket all users policy is activated, CloudTrail is enabled, config service is not enabled. So you can see whether security and pseudonymization, one of the 12 KPIs, is taken care of by a cloud related product such as Lightspin. Another cool product is a product called Sierra. And you can see there that they provide you the capability, they integrate with your cloud environment seamlessly. You just need to provide them with the relevant role. And they collect all the data that you have in your system, whether it's PII, PHI, which is health, customer data, whether it's in the EU and UN or the US. They collect all the data. They filter and organize the data in a very nice dashboard. And you can see, for example, PII in S3 bucket is publicly exposed, credentials in plain text. So it also gives you the capability to understand what's going on with your PII in the system, and whether it lives up to the security, pseudonymization, transparency KPIs that you saw before. And of course, you can also, open a Jira ticket and take action related to the findings that you have. The third one is another cool product which is called Ox Security. By the way, I have no assets or any benefit from any companies. It's just cool products that I found in this industry today. So what you can see in Ox Security, that they follow your security, your entire CI/CD. And you can see here, for example, that they have CI/CD posture. They also take care of third-party components. And when a third-party component is found to be vulnerable as part of your supply chain, then you can see that you can have the recommended remediation, whether to upgrade, et cetera, et cetera. So these products deal with these 4 KPIs about privacy. But what about the remaining ones? They are all product-related privacy elements that we need to focus on. And what I've been doing for the past, since 2017, is I have built something which is called Product Privacy Framework. And what I did is, and I did it together with the organization Privacy Council. This is a legal, he's a lawyer from UK. And what we did is we took the 99 articles of GDPR and the 21 legal provisions from CCPA, and an article or provision is, it's a detail, the terms and requirements for data protection in legalese language. Meaning, I don't know if you had the chance to read any one of the articles of GDPR or CCPA. When I read it as a technical person, I had no idea what I had to do in my product to comply with these regulations. So I had to sit with this individual who is a lawyer, who understands these legalese language, and together we created these 110 technical requirements, which are low-level technical requirements that R&D can understand exactly what, how, and where to do in their specific product. Eventually, if you work in an agile environment, we created a complete epic that each product that wants to adopt this privacy framework, just import this epic and implement it, incorporate it as part of their PI planning. So we started off with this one, and I'll show you just a brief demonstration of what it includes. So basically what we did is we divided the privacy framework to 5 types of requirements. The first type of requirement is called architecture type, because whenever we do something that's related to, well, not only privacy, whenever we do anything in our product, first of all, we need to understand what we have in the product. So the first and main requirement is an architecture type requirement. It says to the system engineer or the system architect of that specific product, please understand and analyze the PII that you have in the system, and I'll show you an example. The other type of requirement is documentation type requirement. And GDPR and CCPA and CPRA, they tell you what you need to do. They don't tell you how you need to do it. So whenever we were able to create a process that by documentation, we will comply with the requirement, we opted to do that in a documentation way because the effort on R&D was lower. In terms of the compliance, we complied whether it's automated or via documentation, so there was no difference. The other type was a legal type, which means during the interaction with GDPR and CCPA, there are a lot of points where you need to be very transparent with either the data subject, data controller, data processor, or the customer, stating to them what is your obligation and what is my obligation as a data controller or a data processor. So throughout the product privacy framework and the documentation, we provide readily available legal statements that state very clearly to both parties who is responsible for what. The fourth type of requirement is an implementation type. Once we did the architecture and we did the documentation and we did the legal, bottom line, we had to have some improvements or enhancements done in the product that will, we'll need to code them in the product and enhance the product to support the specific requirements made by GDPR. And the fifth one was type SaaS operation, because in a SaaS-related product, our privacy responsibility doesn't end in the product, but it also transfers to the team that manages the product, right? If we're managing our SaaS product, we are the SaaS operator, then we need to make sure that the way that we operate the product also conforms to some privacy regulations. So let's see an example. The first example is the architecture type example, that we ask the system architect or the relevant focal points from the product to understand the types of PII that they have in the system. What is the type of PII? What is the source of PII? What is the category or the purpose of processing? the list of locations, and the list of data flows, everything that GDPR is asking us, we put it in the requirement. And you can see here in R1-2 that once we conclude the analysis, we ask the product to put it in a specific document that we call product privacy settings document, and I'll elaborate about that in the end. We also created something which is called a compliance level. This is a five levels compliance level, similar to BSIM compliance level. 0 means I have no idea what is the compliance level. 3 means I comply with the requirement, and 4 means I comply with it in an automated manner. Because remember that we said that we don't have to comply with the requirement in an automated manner, we can do it manually. What we also did is we mapped each type of such a requirement to the GDPR article, the CCPA requirement. We also did it for NIST, and we're about to do that for FedRAMP as well. And we did that for 2 reasons. The first one is whether we review it with R&D and they said, hey, Shlomi, why did you decide about this specific requirement? So we can refer them to the specific article in GDPR or CCPA, read it with them together and explain to them, this is the reason that we chose to interpret the requirement this way, because it's required by GDPR and CCPA. And the second reason is because whether customers will ask us. If customers will ask us, why do you decide to do that this way, we will show them the way that it's done, the way that it was interpreted. And the last one was easy comment that R&D can put here, for example, what is the user story, what is the gap analysis, what is their analysis of that specific requirement. And eventually, once everything is understood in the product privacy framework that you saw, and the document, all the features are implemented as part of the product. We also want to convey the privacy capabilities that we have in our products to our customers. Eventually, we're doing things for our customers. So we're creating, and I give you an example here of a document for one of Opentext product, which is called Service Management Automation. It's the competitor in the industry to ServiceNow, if some of you are familiar. This is the version that was released in 2022-11, 4 months ago. And what you can see here is that this document has 2 main chapters. The first chapter, which is chapter number 2, we provide this document to our customers or to the administrator of the customer that will manage our product on their behalf. So the first chapter is the administrator task and capabilities. In this chapter, we provide the administrator the capabilities to manage privacy-related topics in the product. For example, set up custom retention policy. So out of the box, the product is configured to save the data for a certain amount of time. But as part of GDPR and CCPA, you need to allow your customer to change the retention period according to their own needs, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, 4 years, etc., etc. For example, the regulation in Germany for banks is to retain PII for 4 years. So they need to be able to do that in the product. For example, change, view, or delete restricted processing of PII. If I'm as a data subject or the system administrator do not want to process a certain PII, I need to be able to provide that capability in the product, okay, not in the cloud environment. And another example is export PII from the system. One of the basic requirements of GDPR and CCPA is to enable the data subject to request from the data controller of the system to export all their PII so they will know what exactly they preserve on them. The second part of the document is chapter number 3, which is setting information and activities related to the data subject. This chapter deals with the specific information that the data subject can know about the system. For example, PII collected and processed by the system. As part of GDPR, we're obligated to provide information to the data subject. What is the specific PII that our system collects on them? Okay. view the retention policy. Okay, how long do we preserve the data? For example, the difference between chapter 2 for the administrator, we can configure the retention period. For the data subject is to view how long we keep it, view acceptable usage policy, view privacy contact details. If we want to contact someone, we need to have the contact details. The cookies that we present use in the product. We are all familiar with these annoying privacy or cookie notices whenever we log into or enter some sort of a website. We have to build this capability in the product. By the way, the way to do it is by default, you should opt in order to receive the cookies and not opt out. So many sites do implement the cookie notice in an incorrect way, just for you to be aware of that. So that's about the product privacy framework. The benefit of that privacy framework is clear requirements R&D can understand and implement, easy to create the product's gap analysis and implementation plan. It's measurable, KPIs shared with senior management, and ensure trust in our customers because we provide them the document. And you can see here, for example, that you can measure according to the privacy framework. It creates very nice analytics saying, product A complies, 90+%, but product B complies, 20+%. So we need to put more attention in product B. It also shows you how compliant are you with the specific KPIs that we mentioned. And lastly, this is the last slide, Lior. So I have you told me 25 minutes, so I'm 24 minutes and 20 seconds. So if anyone remembers this specific slide, this specific scene from the movie Shrek, in this specific scene, the donkey tells to the customer, you have to understand about ogres. And ogres have layers like onions. Well, so does privacy, the cloud layer and the product layer. So both of them together comprise the overall privacy that we need to implement in our products, both cloud and on-premise. That's what I have for you guys. Back to you, Lior.
Okay, very, very interesting. Thank you for that, Shlomi. Guys, if you have any questions to Shlomi, please write them down in the chat or in the Q&A. Of course, Shlomi will answer all your questions. Shlomi, it's very interesting that you mentioned the combination between a company and the cloud providers. Is there any obligations from privacy point of view on the cloud provider?
Absolutely. If you look at the shared responsibility model for AWS, for example, and you go into the website, the link that shows the certifications, so definitely there is an obligation on the cloud providers for a certain amount of privacy, such as security, pseudonymization, access control rights, etc., etc. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So you need to validate because not every cloud in the responsible model is actually the same. So you as a company that want to shift to the cloud your information, your data, you first need to validate which kind of regulation you need to be obligated to. If you need to be GDPR compliance or California Act or any other regulation, you need to validate that you also, the cloud provider is aligned with this regulation. So is there something that when an assessment is coming and validating that you are aligned, you need to validate that you perform the necessary check?
I'll give you an example. That's an excellent question. When we build the products in Opentext, we leverage a cloud provider, and then we say, okay, for European Union-based customers, we will build our products in the EU region. And when we build our products for US-based customer, we will leverage a US-based region. And whenever there is a need to transfer information between the different regions, we need to take care of the relevant precautions in order to make sure that we comply with the relevant regulation of data migration.
Okay,
absolutely, so it's part of the design of the product.
So what you are saying is when you are shifting to the cloud, your data is actually being resigned on a specific region. So if you are a US region or a European region, or maybe next time Israel region, you need to validate what are the local regulation also, or what you need to be.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that we encountered recently was, well, I'll give you a little secret. As part of the products, we leverage Google Analytics. So whenever, and as part of the GDPR requirements, you are obligated to list your sub-processors. Sub-processor is an entity that you use as a sub-processor of the data, for example, Google Analytics. And Google Analytics is based off in the US. So when we deployed our products for an EU customer in the EU region, but leveraged Google Analytics to share the information with US, we were in danger of breaking the regulation, and we stopped it immediately, and we didn't leverage Google Analytics for these specific customers. So definitely, you have to be conscious of your customers' requirements, make them aware that what are they obligated to, and reflect that in your product.
That's very interesting. There is a question by Davis. Can location be considered PII if it's a temporary location where data subject is?
So I'll go back to the definition of PII. So never mind. So PII is a piece of data. Oh, it's coming there. Okay, so PII is any information that relates to an identified or identifiable living individual. Different pieces of information which collected together can lead to the identification of a particular person. So if by the location, whether it's temporary or constant, you can identify that specific individual, then of course it constitutes PII. And therefore subjected to the relevant controls.
Okay, so as a company, you need to map the data and also validate what are the obligations on your data. For example, if you are processing EU citizens, you need to be comply with GDPR, and your cloud provider need to be also comply with the GDPR requirements.
Exactly. So the first thing that you need to do on the product level and on the cloud level is understand what is the PII that you have in your system. And by the way, one of the requirements of GDPR and CCPA is if you don't need that PII, stop collecting that PII.
Okay. Okay, Shlomi, thank you very much for that. It was very insightful, and I think it's opened our mind to better understand what are our obligations, what we need to take into consideration when shifting a sensitive information to the cloud, and what should be checked before doing this shift as part of the roles and responsibility model with you and your cloud provider. So Shlomi, thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, so we are going to the next lecture, and I want to present the